So adaptive malware is probably the biggest concern right now. Things that have the ability to change their own code bases on the fly and evade, standard detection mechanisms, even behavioral and AI based detection mechanisms.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of Hive Live. I'm Alex Netty, and I'm glad you've joined us today. Hopefully, you've been following all of our great approachable cybersecurity content on social media, but if you haven't, you can find us on all our major channels under @Hive Systems. Make sure to give us a follow and subscribe today. The age of artificial intelligence, or AI, is upon us. So, how do we harness the latest technology while securing our information? In this episode, we're going to dive into the dynamic intersection of cybersecurity and AI, exploring the evolving landscape where technology meets cybersecurity. As our reliance on digital systems grows, so do those threats, making the relationship between cybersecurity measures and AI innovation more crucial than ever. To help break it all down today and examine the Harvey Dent of cybersecurity is my co-host and fellow Hive Systems team member, Andrew Bradley. Welcome, Andrew.
Hey, Alex, thanks for having me, as usual.
Let's get right into it. One of the big things I think we need to talk about is just breaking down some of the basics on all this. Obviously, we hear about AI a lot. We're seeing it start to appear in places like email composers and marketing and everything else. But how is that relevant to the world of cybersecurity? Where is it going to be kind of applicable to our industry?
Yeah, I mean, right now AI is kind of this hodgepodge, a collection of different types of technology and technological advances. So we've got things like language models, machine learning, robotic process automation, self-executing code. Each of those are a little bit different. We've got actual neural nets and things that people are working on, like Boston Dynamics, to power robots. And some of that stuff is a little bit more advanced. When we're talking about AI in the cybersecurity space, we're really talking about things that are like the language models, the behavioral analysis, the machine learning type stuff, and even the process automation type stuff. So we're sticking to kind of like the more conventional, I'd say not the bleeding edge of AI development, but more of the stuff that's been around for a little while and is kind of bundled under the AI flag there. And in the realm of cybersecurity, a lot of that stuff is being used both on the offensive and the attacker side and on the defensive side. A lot of what we're seeing is kind of like the development of novel attack methods and malware that leverage some of these newer like language model tools and some of the machine learning algorithms that people have developed to create more sophisticated attack vectors and malware to basically exploit their victims. And on the other side of that, we're seeing people on the defensive side try to develop more proactive and engaging tools to combat the development of these more novel and scary AI-based attacks. So they're using the AI in both directions there, and just kind of trying to stay one step ahead of the other party in developing things that are to their advantage. So like you said, I think it is basically like a Harvey Dent. You got the two faces of AI in cybersecurity. You've got the good guys and the defenders and the proactive protectors, and you've got the bad guys in their amorphous malware and very very sophisticated attack layers now. We're seeing a lot of trends in that area.
Right? We've always seen where there's attackers coming in with new and novel ways of phishing people or scamming people, and as cybersecurity practitioners, we're always on the back foot trying to respond to that and sometimes stay ahead. I think you're right. Introducing a new technology, unfortunately, it's going to be the same old, both of us trying to stay one step ahead of the other, and hopefully, the good guys come out ahead on that. That being said, let's start with our industry at large. Obviously, AI does a lot of things well, does some things not so well, but obviously, we've seen a lot of AI language models come out and generative AI be useful for developing words for websites or copy or responding to inquiries or sometimes even drawing pictures. That is not helpful for our industry. But what might be helpful for our industry? What are some ways that LLMs and AI and generative AI are going to fit into our industry and potentially help us do better at our jobs?
Yeah, the first and kind of earliest foray into the AI spectrum of tools was the incorporation of behavioral analysis and heuristics into like endpoint detection tools, for example. So a lot of those tools started to implement behavioral analysis to try to pinpoint things that humans just weren't able to keep a grasp on 24/7. So to make things a little bit easier, they started using these behavioral models and algorithms that they were developing in house to support some of those tools and kind of automate a lot of the processes associated with detection. So detection is a big it's probably the biggest front where AI is giving the most bang for the buck. Just identifying areas where your floodgates might be open and identifying places where an attacker may be trying to do something and being able to detect that near instantaneously and then respond to it either through manual response measures triggering your response workflows or through automation. And that's the automation part is getting better and better, right? So proactive blocking or proactive sandboxing of compromised assets, stuff like that is getting better, and AI is contributing to that. But really the detection is where things need to grow and develop first, because as we know, the attackers are getting more and more advanced. They're using the AI themselves to evade detection. And so the AI on the other side doing detection needs to keep up. So yeah, I'd say the biggest focus area right now has been in the detection side, whether that's network detection, endpoint detection. Either way, it's the detect domain of security that's been most impacted by, at least on the defensive side, by AI. There are other
I mean,
pieces as
that
well.
makes sense,
Yep.
right? The defensive and detection side has always just been a waterfall of information,
Mm-hmm.
just tons of logs, tons of events always coming out. And 9 times out of 10, the tuning effort for that is a huge undertaking. So
Yep.
if you can get better tuning and potentially even better detection as a result with AI, coming through hundreds of thousands of events, sometimes per second, maybe you can find something that needle in the haystack that maybe you
Yep.
weren't looking for or didn't know about. So to that end, right, that is a good innovation. I'm
Yeah, and I
interested to
mean,
see how it's
if
how it's going to end up working out, or the efficacy rate of those detections, or if it's all just garbage. And tuning your AI detections, I'm sure is going to be a whole thing in and of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when we think about, the way detection used to work, it used to be a lot of signature-based stuff. So you had to wait on a vendor to identify, a threat vector or a threat or a vulnerability and release a signature so that you could update your client or update your detection server, and it would identify those things. Now we have this kind of behavioral analysis and these machine learning algorithms that can adapt on the fly. So the burden is taken way off the companies to have to keep things updated. I mean, there's still signatures at play. There's still, various detection algorithms at play and things that need to be updated regularly. Anyway, it's not taking everything out of the hands of the people that manage the tools, but
Mhm.
it is making things a lot easier because once something is put into the environment and those behavioral analysis and heuristics engines get to work and they start identifying how things kind of interact and you know transmissions occur and connections and everything, what your network, basically your network footprint looks like and everything from a day-to-day perspective looks like. Once it learns that information, it adapts on the fly. It's a lot
Mhm.
faster than humans having to go like pinpoint specific types of attacks or specific vectors and specific threats to address with specific policies or specific signatures and algorithms and things like that. The tool kind of takes care of all that stuff itself, which is nice.
Mhm. Yep. And I think even again, even if it's just suggesting things, maybe not necessarily detecting, but going, hey, we're seeing
Yep.
something that seems off. Does this regularly seem off? And tuning and learning from that could be a good benefit. Again, given just the
Yep.
waterfall of information
Threat
that's happening.
intelligence. Yeah. So some of the threat modeling and intelligence stuff too. So, even not necessarily detecting anything, but detecting places where things may happen. So where you have potential weaknesses. There's a lot of tools now that are going out and looking at, configurations, providing recommendations on the fly for things that are weak or could potentially lead to a breach. Just giving you like mapping your threats is something that this AI model has kind of contributed to greatly. I wouldn't say it's perfect yet. There's still a lot of work being done in the areas of identification um, for like threat vectors, just because so many environments are so different. There's so much nuance when you go from one company system to another. They never look the same. So the AI based tools are helping a lot there. It's still just a work in progress. It needs to be supported by the manual processes, by your quantitative risk functions, by your enterprise risk functions, and it's not going to be a silver bullet solution, but it is definitely helpful and takes some of the burden off.
Yeah, absolutely. What other ways? Obviously, we talk about detection stuff. Anything else that we see AI fitting into in the realm of support for cyber teams and IT teams in general?
Yeah, I mean, one of the biggest functions and biggest areas people are focusing on now with AI is kind of incident response.
Mhm.
So incident response and with like security orchestration and response tools, AI is playing a big role in kind of weeding through the false positives and the kind of day-to-day stuff that wouldn't necessarily rise from maybe an event to an actual confirmed incident
Mhm.
type deal. So it's weeding out a lot of those things that normally people like a SOC would have to go through and comb through and figure out. You know, God, this is like the 300th time today we're seeing an account lockout like of the same account. Is it just somebody missing their forgetting their password and trying to run through all their potential combinations? Behavioral analysis and AI help figure out for the SOC people whether or not that is something that they actually have to pay attention to. So it can give them additional context, or it can totally weed it out. Like it just knows, it can look at the IP address that's coming from. It is a known IP address. It is like it makes sense based on other contextual details that this might be something that can be excluded from the incident workflow. And this way,
Mhm.
here the incident responders and the SOCs can focus on the things that are things that look like they're out of the ordinary, actually, and things they may have to actually follow up on, may have to report, even if they're on the hook for reporting suspected and confirmed incidents, like a lot of our government supporting customers are. That's the type of stuff that AI is really getting into and really helping with the most lately, is eliminating the I don't know if the right word is the drag of that incident response workflow, but
Mhm.
definitely helping people weed out stuff that they don't need their eyes on, and so they can focus on the things that may actually have a measurable impact on the environment.
Well, and I suppose, right? Yeah, you could roll that into like your sort of platforms as well, and
Hmm.
to a certain extent, some of those tier one things, like you said today, that may require an
Yep.
actual human to be involved. Potentially, right, in the long term, some of that tier one support could be handled
Yep.
automatically by AI. That's a big win because now you can use your experts to investigate the real stuff, the things that maybe are bubbling up above, yeah, account lockouts or social media or running an executable stuff that generally isn't meeting that threshold. And now they're looking to something that's a little bit more like privilege escalation or just some
Yep.
lateral movement across the network, stuff that really needs a human touch. Even then, AI might be able to help with some of that detection and
Oh yeah.
recommendations or responses. So,
Yeah. If you think about like moving to contextual based access, or we're talking about like temporary access provisioning or privilege access management. If somebody's requesting access to an administrative function through a privilege escalation workflow, AI can monitor that and see, hey, it's a weird hour. This person doesn't normally log in at these hours,
hmm
during these hours, or from this IP address, or from whatnot, and say, you know what, we're gonna restrict this and notify somebody, so that there's a second layer of additional authentication or authorization that's applied here, just to make sure, because we're not quite sure. And that's the type of stuff that like behavioral analysis and heuristics can help support. The other thing is, like, a lot of people are using managed security service providers now, MSSPs, to handle like tier one support, like you mentioned. The dirty little secret is a lot of those companies are using AI based tools on the back end to support that anyway. So why not bring it in house? Save yourself the cost of taking the
cut
tier
out the
one off
middleman.
off base, right? Exactly. Cut out the middleman, implement it for yourself, and you can basically, right now it's still a little bit in its infancy, so in a little nascent. I wouldn't necessarily rely directly on these tools, uh, solely, but you can maybe bring your tier one back in house, and it'll be a little bit more scalable for you using these AI tools, and you'll have the cost savings of not having to run it through an MSSP.
Yeah, that's good. Uh, well, knowing we've talked about kind of our side of the house, let's talk about the other side, the darker side of the world. Definitely
Yep.
AI is posed to make a big help. I think one of the early ways that we've seen it really start to come out is with a lot of social engineering attacks in terms of language for emails, for phishing, or SMS, or potentially even using it to pretend to be somebody on the phone. I think we're already starting to see some of that, but obviously, I think that's only going to get worse as people learn to use it more and more. What are some other ways that attackers have an opportunity, not trying to give hints, to the other side to make this our jobs harder, but what are some ways that potentially AI can be misused in all of this?
Yeah, I don't think we need to worry about giving them any hints. They're all pretty in touch with where they're going in this adventure. But yeah, there's definitely some new considerations that are spawning because of the AI craze. So adaptive malware is probably the biggest concern right now. Things that have the ability to change their own code bases on the fly
Mm,
and evade, you know, standard detection mechanisms, even behavioral and AI based detection mechanisms. Certainly signature based stuff that relies on kind of static code or static hashes of certain pieces of malware and the stuff that they're embedded in to detect them. Adaptive malware changes the game with that because this code basically the algorithms that are built into it changes its code on the fly. Every time it replicates, it changes itself a little bit to avoid detection. So that's something that is really on the forefront of everybody's mind right now is how do we detect these things and how do we stay ahead of the game so that, you know, if something is in our system, when it doesn't propagate and change so much that we can't detect where it's going, where it's spread to, where everything is that's infected from it. So how do we keep it from getting into the system to begin with? And a lot of the ways
not
this stuff,
unlike a
yeah,
real world
exactly.
virus, like a
Yep.
sickness in the human body, right? It continues to
Yeah.
mutate, and so how do we as a medical community come in and potentially create a vaccine
Amazing.
for it
Yeah.
ahead of it
Yep.
and predict it? Yeah, it's now going to start happening in the digital world as well. Those
Yep.
viruses are becoming more like, well, real world viruses.
And it's kind of the same thing, right? Like we look at the way, you know, the COVID virus basically mutated itself and had all these different strains over time. Adaptive malware is kind of the same way. We're playing a little bit of a game of catch up here and identifying those things after they happen. So one of the things where people are trying to do is create predictive algorithms to determine how an adaptive malware might change when it jumps host to host, basically by deconstructing the code that's used to create these things. And because a lot of the adaptive malware that's out there today is based on similar or the same kind of pre-existing algorithms and models, it gives a little bit of insight into how other malware are going to act that use that same kind of base foundational code. So
Mm,
some of the predictive tools and some of the detective tools out there are working on, you know, dealing with this problem directly. You know, things like Black Mamba, for example, which was a simulated AI keylogger that used a GPT based algorithm to basically like turn itself into a polymorphic piece of malware. And that simulation was really scary to people because none of the detection tools that were available at the time that simulation could detect Black Mamba. And it wreaked a lot of havoc in the simulation, and they're worried that like something like this is going to come out in the wild. So far, the malware we've seen is kind of stupid AI, stupid, like kind of silly, a much smaller scale or a much simpler version of what we might expect from a Black Mamba type thing. So it's
mhm.
not as difficult for these things to detect, but they're getting there, right? Things advance, technology advances, people's understanding of the algorithms and of, you know, GPT based stuff will advance, and this malware will become more complex and more I don't want to say self aware because we're talking about Skynet, but more adaptive, we'll say.
Yeah. And you're right, that's scary because the signature based looking at
Yep.
hashes and stuff has been easy. We can share those indicators of compromise, but you're right. You know, how are we going to share and more importantly ingest that from a detection standpoint into our tools to say, hey, you're not just looking for this hash, you're looking for one of these 500,000 hashes, or
Yep.
here's the predicted algorithm for how it might mutate. So it could be anywhere along this elliptical curve for the hash itself.
Mhm.
That's a brutal proposition for defenders and for
And
us.
that's where the behavioral analysis stuff becomes so important because the way thing you can no longer rely simply on detecting based on, you know, like you said, like a hash or based on a signature. You have to basically monitor everything for the behavior of the system, the behavior of all the software, the components of the system,
Yeah,
and
what could be
determine
the
if something is
symptoms
out of line, right?
of
It's
this virus, right?
exactly
Yeah,
something out of
it
baseline.
opens, it
Yep.
executes, it then locks one computer before it moves laterally.
Yep.
Cool. If you see those things, it's a good indicator you've caught this
Yeah,
variant
it's
of
like, hey,
virus.
this computer, this one system just opened up a port that it never opens up, and there seems to be an inbound connection trying to come through from the internet. You know, maybe that's an indicator of some piece of malware we can't detect on there. And so the behavioral analysis type detection tools are good at finding that type of thing and reporting on it. It's just you got to make sure that your SOC or your incident responders are able to track it back and get through those processes very quickly
Mhm.
before something bad happens. Yeah.
Oh man, we are in for it.
I mean, but like it's delivered the same way. Malware gets into places the same way. It's
Mhm.
always through, phishing and social engineering schemes, right? So somebody clicks on an email and gets sent off to a malicious website and installs something from it, or clicks on an attachment and it gets installed from there. But that's another way that AI is kind of changing the game as well. So these advanced social engineering techniques are being supported by language models and advanced language models like GPT and other AI based tools to create like the perfect phishing email or the
Mhm.
perfect like deep fake social engineering type phone calls, for example. They're being used today to exploit the people now, to just to get like the other things in the front door, just to get the adaptive malware in place, or just to wreak havoc like they did through normal means of phishing and social engineering. So like we're
Yeah.
seeing that as well. Yeah.
Mhm. Oh man. I think I think one of the big problems we're going to have here is attackers and defenders. Companies and hackers and scammers out there play by different rules, unfortunately. And obviously, they're in the wake of AI really becoming popular last year and into this year. There are now starting to be a lot of both ethical and regulatory slash compliance considerations that are coming into the fray. A lot of people have been talking about these for a while, and now as it's become AI is becoming more popular, this is becoming more at the forefront. Part of me worries about some of those ethical, legal, and compliance obligations that may kind of kneecap some of this development for our industry, while the other half doesn't get to experience all of those. What are some of the things, though, that are going to probably come into play from an AI perspective for the world of cybersecurity?
Yeah, there's obviously big privacy considerations around the collection of data that might be used for some of these tools, to support like behavioral analysis and heuristic type detections. Um, you work for a company, there's an expectation that you don't have full privacy on the systems you work on, but the amount of information that they're gathering about people's the contextual information about people's behaviors when they sign in, where they sign in from, how often they use certain programs, all of that stuff kind of creates these privacy questions on like what that data can also be used for, not just for detecting malware, but can it be used for HR or performance evaluations? Can it be used for other types of internal metric and decision making, leadership decision making that goes into company management? Like what all is that data going to be used for? And that's one of the things people are kind of struggling with right now. How much data can they collect on their employees? Can they collect on people? Can they collect on the outside internet? Even let's say you have a perimeter security device, you're trying to, you know, determine how many times a day people are trying to access you from various parts of the world. How much information can you reasonably collect about those people and store them in your systems? And what kind of privacy considerations need to come into play there? Like GDPR, a lot of this stuff gets hamstrung by GDPR's data collection, data and data preservation requirements and data protection requirements for EU citizens. So in the EU, a lot of the stuff there's going to be a reckoning as far as what people can reasonably collect about people, about their users, about their employees that they can use to feed some of these systems. So that we haven't quite gotten to that point yet where we're having these big discussions on the privacy side yet, but it's definitely coming. Yeah.
And the EU, I think, is already a little bit ahead on some of the
Yep.
legislation that they have passed around AI. The US classically is lagging behind,
Behind. Yeah.
unfortunately. So, yeah, you're even going to continue to have for companies that are global, you have this discrepancy between applicability of potentially your security controls. And this
Hmm.
already existed prior to AI. Some countries like Germany have more stringent requirements for what's allowed from a monitoring perspective. And so, even those companies that are global are already contending with that. I
Right.
think we're just going to see the same thing here with AI about applicability and what's allowed or not allowed. So, hey, I just bought this really expensive tool. I'm super excited to roll it out. Turns out I can only roll it out to my U.S. based, employees. Can't do it for
Hmm.
anybody overseas, and I can't actually do it in California, Virginia, or anywhere else that's applied for create a privacy rule. So now you
Yep.
have this mismatch of applicability for controls, and your cool new tool is kind of kneecapped from the start. So I do think, yeah,
Exactly.
that's gonna be
Yeah.
a big part of it.
and not just the the protection framework, so the things that are meant to protect the citizens and protect employees and employers, but the frameworks and the regulations and industry standards that are usually developed to support new technological advancements. So like where should we put, where should we use AI to specifically support security processes? That type of stuff really hasn't come out yet from the government, the large governments. It's just they don't know yet, right? So like you'll see with like, let's say FedRAMP, for example. FedRAMP Rev 5 controls have moved a lot towards automation. The FedRAMP PMO is moving towards automation, but AI is still not really discussed. There's discussion of like next gen security services,
Mhm.
movement from signature-based detection mechanisms to behavioral analysis and machine learning type detection products and services. But there's not really this bigger conversation going on yet about like language models and other types of AI, generative AI, stuff like that, and really dealing with those within the context of these frameworks like FedRAMP, FISMA, in the U.S.
Yeah, and
specifically. Yeah,
you're right. The federal government and NIST are at least put out some stuff about AI, but it is
yeah,
light in its. I don't know. It's not very deep at the end of the day. It's pretty shallow in its approach. And
yep,
yeah, this is a great example where I worry for both federal agencies and those companies that are working with them.
mhm,
Unfortunately, it's likely to be a blanket ban on it until basically more is known. This was something we saw
mhm.
classic with the cloud. For a long time, everybody was scared of the cloud, scared of public, sector agencies working with the private sector who maybe didn't know how to secure it to their standards. And as a result, the cloud was outright banned. Now the federal government can't get enough of the cloud because maybe they understand or it's been long enough or some assurances have
They could
been
save
made
money.
that,
They realized.
yeah, that Silicon Valley's there. You could save some money. So now we're interested. Something tells me that AI is going to be slow to be adopted, if not outright not allowed into the federal government space, which, you're right, is going to be tough because a lot of those companies that are in the private sector are already working with the federal government. They have tools and stuff in place. They are bringing in AI into those tools to help and appease their commercial customers, which means it's probably sliding right in to the federal government as well. So it's kind of one of those, it's a little too late. The cat's out of the bag. I think the federal government needs to do a little bit more in that regard.
Yeah, and also, like just discussing how these things are being used and thinking about what should be published and what should be transparent versus opaque, right? So there's things, obviously the use of AI and for defense programs, intelligence stuff like that's never going to be transparent. But when
Hmm.
we're talking about, companies like companies, publicly traded companies, private sector, and even public sector stuff that's used with the general public, the way that AI is being used needs to be transparent. Algorithms that are used to collect information, perform some sort of metric based analysis of data that's collected on people and used to feed AI systems and train AI systems. All that stuff should be as transparent as possible. We haven't gotten there with transparency law and that goes back to privacy law in general. We haven't gotten there with the transparency law, really acknowledging the existence of things like chat gpt or these other advanced algorithms that are used to crunch massive amounts of data from years and years and years and then turn that into these predictive or detective models
Hmm.
or supportive AI models. We haven't really gotten any guidance on what people can do yet. So chat gpt crunching, I forget how long it went back before. Was it 5 years
Hmm.
to 2021, something like that? um, Crunching all that data, what they used, that everything that was basically publicly available to them at the time. We don't have any idea whether that's going to stay the same way, if it's going to be as open as ChatGPT had it, or if there's going to be restrictions on like what you can actually use to train these AIs. And that's something that is going to need to be addressed sooner rather than later, because there is just so many. I mean, there's like every time you turn on the news, there's a new AI company that's seeking investment or trying to go public for some reason, and uh, and
Well,
they
and,
need to
and
head this stuff off at the pass.
yeah, and definitely speculating, as we look into the future for some trends and things, I think that's one of them, right? AI
Yep.
eating AI. And we're already starting to see that where
Yeah.
some AI models are being trained on data that they think is authentic and it's not. It's other AI data and it's
Right.
a copy of a
Yep.
copy of a copy. And yeah, things get real weird real quick. That's a great example, right? If we're even in a cybersecurity world using detection mechanisms to detect events, but now we're using the events that have been detected and correlated from the AI side, and AI is learning off of that AI. At some point, things start getting weird, and it starts automatically shutting out your CEO because they go, well, he's logging on, so we should shut him out because we've AI'd too many times, and now your detections are getting
Yeah.
off the rails. I think the transparency part is a good point because one of the things from an AI perspective, at the end of the day, AI is really good at doing analysis, and I think this is one of the realms where in the world of cybersecurity and really AI in general, I'd like to see more suggestions and recommendations as if AI was a human, right? Hey, I have combed through tons of data, more than any human could probably do. And here are some recommendations. We're even
Yep.
seeing this in cybersecurity a little bit in like the robustness of cybersecurity policies, where some tools are suggesting, hey, I have read as AI, I've read through this policy and I think it's pretty good. You should come in and still review it to check, but it's got all the things I'm looking for: purpose, scope, some controls, a revision history. It's been reviewed within the last 12 months. I think this is pretty good. Or, hey, this kind of looks like a picture of a dog. I don't think this is a cybersecurity policy. I don't
Yeah.
think you should accept this. That is, in my mind, a good view of AI. And like I said, I think I'll be a little hesitant, even on the detection response side. It'd be fine to escalate it and say, hey, here's an alert. You should look into it. Feel free to give me a rating, good or bad, and let it kind of train off of that a little bit. But
Yep.
yeah, as we look in the future, that is one of my big fears is the snake eating its tail. And suddenly you get some great benefits early on, and suddenly you're training it on itself and it's training on the things that it's learned against itself, and you become this iterative I don't know, downward spiral of just garbage, and suddenly you're not getting the payoff. And then what? Does everything become cyclical and we dump AI and we go back to all manual again? I don't know.
Yeah, that's actually a good point because you talk about like poisoning the well, right? So there's also
Mhm.
these novel attack methods on AI where you inject pieces of bad information into the information that it's crunching and using to develop its models, and it comes out with an inaccurate representation of what was intended, or an inaccurate
Mhm.
perspective on things that are supposed to be intended. So that's another thing that attackers are looking into as well, is like poisoning these AI based defense mechanisms by training them to look for the wrong thing and ignore the actual thing that's happening. So a lot of sleight of hand type stuff. But yeah, absolutely agree with you. Like the training wheels and the guardrails need to be kept in place. The proactive stuff is cool. It's really nice. It reduces the burden until something like what we're talking about happens, where the well has been poisoned, and now you have to go back and unravel or undo everything you just did because the AI took control in it and it made decisions that it shouldn't have. So keeping the decision making in the human hands for now seems like the best approach, especially when we're dealing with things as complex as security controls and security implementation. So
And we
that's
should
a
note, even for poisoning, AI algorithms, just like all things IT and all things as they are today, they can both be intentional. Hackers and scammers
Mhm.
intentionally, misdirecting a chatbot that's on your website to start spitting out, bad information to people as they come and ask questions. Definitely. But all this poisoning could also be unintentional, right? When we're talking about the detection stuff, if you start accepting some of these recommendations, if there's a junior analyst that just accepts them as is, it's not intentional, but you end up kind of self poisoning your outputs and
Yep,
everything. And so as a result,
exactly.
you do it to yourself. Just like today, a hacker can steal information, but somebody can missend it to the wrong email address too. Data breach either way. But same deal. AI has that opportunity that without in-house training and precautions in place, yeah, you could more or less shoot yourself in the foot with it. So
Yeah, I think one of the things people still like forget is that AI is dependent on humans. It should never change. That dynamic should never change. Humans should never be dependent on AI. It should always be AI is dependent on humans, so
I
that
think
we
I've
set
seen
the
this
rules.
movie, so that's
Yeah, I think
good.
so, right? iRobot, Terminator, one of those. Yeah, exactly. Three
That's a
laws
good.
safe.
Any other speculations or future thinking that you're worried about with all this, or where you think this is headed?
No, honestly, I think the biggest dangers for now are just kind of resting on the laurels of trusting AI, trusting your AI defense mechanisms more than they should be. Um, the other kind of scary scenarios are associated with like the deep fake. So we didn't really talk about a lot of deep fake stuff, but being able to fool security systems and fool other AI even with deepfake content is something that we've got to keep an eye on. Whether that's deepfake audio recordings and deepfake phone calls used to social engineer poor victims in just trying to, I don't know, deal with a credit card, some sort of credit card scam type thing, or if it's like more advanced type stuff with video based deepfakes or facial recognition deepfakes to full facial recognition type software. Like that's where we'll have to deal with that, I think, a lot sooner than people are really anticipating. And stuff out there right now is very scary.
Yeah, definitely. Even like, live faking calls to help
Mm-hmm.
desks, and imitating voice. That one's pretty tricky and takes some knowledge. But, some financial institutions use voice based authentication on a
Yep.
call. So if you call from a number and you repeat a specific sentence and say it in the way that you've said it before, you're in. Well, if I spoof your number and I have enough audio of you to say that specific sentence, I'm in. And now I'm making
Yep.
trades or transactions that otherwise I really should not be authorized to do. And, unfortunately, Andrew, for you and I, we have given quite a few audio samples today in talking
Oh
through
yeah.
more than enough to train a model.
And honestly, you train that model, and you train a model that scours people's social media and just takes all that information. That special the not only your voice recognition, but that little special passcode or passphrase that you use to get into your phone account or
Mhm.
whatever it is, it might be able to pick that out, or at least try a bunch of times to pick that out and say it in your voice. So this is the type of stuff that gets a little scary.
Oh man, it's gonna be a wild year to put it politely.
Oh yeah.
I'm looking forward to the first thing where something goes wrong from either side.
Yeah, I'm
Uh,
just waiting for the AI malware to infect the full self-drive AI, and then
okay,
have it take orders from the other AI down the street. That's decided it's going to be an attacker based on models it learned from. So
I've seen this
eh,
movie
all
too,
the
so
AI
that's good.
inception that's going on.
Oh man. Well, that's all the time we have today. We want to thank you for joining us and hopefully you found it helpful as we examine the benefits and the pain points of AI in the cybersecurity industry. I really enjoyed our discussion around some of the opportunities that exist, but definitely as we think about the novel ways that hackers and scammers are going to use AI, I look forward to kind of seeing that at the end of the day. Andrew and I appreciate some of those attacks and the novelty of them. They're going to be out there, and unfortunately, they'll be scary this year, but they will be interesting to see what AI looks like. We'll probably come back and have a similar discussion, Andrew, in a year and see what 2024 looked like for AI. So I look forward to that. Before we go, though, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you can be alerted for our next episode by going to www.hivesystems.io/HiveLive. Next month, we're going to be talking about another exciting topic from the world of cybersecurity, so make sure you don't miss it by subscribing to our channel at www.hivesystems.io/HiveLive. Until next time, remember, when it comes to cybersecurity, you need to act and not react. Thank you.